Have you ever looked at a picture of New York City and just thought, wow, how did that even happen? I mean, you've got 8.3 million people, over 32,000 streets, and 5 boroughs all humming with this incredible energy. It's a city unlike any other on the planet. But here's the crazy part. Almost everything we picture when we think of New York, the insane skyline, the world-famous museums, that electric pulse you feel on the avenues, none of that existed 100 years ago. This isn't just a story about a city. It's a story of constant, relentless reinvention. It all started 400 years ago as a tiny European trading post. So, how did it become the most legendary megacity on Earth? Buckle up, because we're about to find out. This is how New York became New York. Long before the skyscrapers, before the concrete and the chaos, this land was a different world. Imagine lush forests, winding rivers, and wildlife everywhere. For an incredible 8,000 years, this was the home of Algonquin-speaking tribes, most notably the Lenape people. They didn't just live here. They lived with the land, hunting, fishing, and farming in a perfect rhythm with nature. This wasn't an empty island waiting to be discovered. It was a thriving, ancient homeland. Then the world began to change. In 1524, an Italian navigator named Giovanni da Verrazzano, sailing for France, was the first European to glide into the harbor. He claimed the land for his king, and then sailed away, with no real follow-up. It wasn't until 1609 that things really started to shift. An Englishman named Henry Hudson, working for the Dutch East India Company, sailed up the river that we now call the Hudson. He claimed the entire area for the Dutch Republic, and soon Dutch traders began setting up posts along the coast to trade furs. In 1624, the Dutch West India Company decided to make it permanent. They sent over families to put down roots. A small group landed on the southern tip of a lush island, the Lenape, called Mannahatta. In 1625, they built a defensive wall and a fort, naming it Fort Amsterdam. And the tiny, scrappy settlement that grew up around it, they called it New Amsterdam. This was the seed from which the 5 boroughs would eventually grow. Now for one of history's most famous and most misunderstood real estate deals. In 1626, the Dutch Director General Peter Minuit met with local Lenape leaders. He traded a collection of goods, things like cloth, kettles, and tools worth about 60 guilders. Today, that's roughly equivalent to $1,000. In exchange, the Dutch gained control over Manhattan Island. It's a complex moment, as the concepts of land ownership were completely different between the two cultures. Under Minuit's successor, Peter Stuyvesant, the settlement grew, hitting a population of about 1,500 by the mid-1650s. Stuyvesant was a tough leader, peg leg and all. He tried to bring order by banning certain religions and cracking down on taverns, which, as you can imagine, didn't make him the most popular guy in town. But the Dutch-English rivalry was heating up across the globe. In 1664, it came knocking on New Amsterdam's door. A small fleet of English warships sailed into the harbor and demanded surrender. Stuyvesant wanted to fight, but the colonists, who weren't his biggest fans anyway, refused. New Amsterdam was surrendered without a single shot being fired. The English quickly renamed it. Fort Amsterdam became Fort James, and New Amsterdam became New York, in honor of the Duke of York, who would later become King James II. The Dutch briefly took it back in 1673, but a year later, the Treaty of Westminster handed it over to the English for good. The Dutch chapter was closed, and the English era of New York had begun. The 1700s were a period of explosive growth. New York's harbor made it a magnet for trade and immigration, and its economy boomed. But this prosperity had a dark side. Slavery became deeply embedded in the city's fabric. By the 1740s, about 20% of New York's residents, around 2,500 people, were enslaved Africans, making it one of the largest urban slave populations in the colonies. As the century wore on, the seeds of revolution began to sprout. Groups like the Sons of Liberty rallied against British taxes right here on these streets. In 1765, delegates from the colonies met in New York for the Stamp Act Congress, one of the first unified stands against British rule. When the Revolutionary War broke out, New York was at the center of the conflict. In 1776, George Washington suffered a crushing defeat at the Battle of Long Island. The British occupied the city for the next 7 long years, until the war finally ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1783. With independence won, New York stepped onto the national stage. In 1785, it was named the very first capital of the United States. 4 years later, on the balcony of Federal Hall on Wall Street, George Washington was inaugurated as the first president. The Bill of Rights was even drafted inside that same building. For a brief, shining moment, New York City was the political heart of a brand new nation. The 19th century is when New York went from a big town to a global powerhouse. In 1784, Alexander Hamilton founded the Bank of New York, laying the financial groundwork. Then, in 1792, traders met under a buttonwood tree on Wall Street, creating the institution that would become the New York Stock Exchange. But the real game-changer was the Erie Canal, completed in 1825. This man-made waterway connected the Great Lakes to the Hudson River, funneling the wealth of the American heartland directly into New York's harbor. The city blew past rivals like Boston and Philadelphia to become the nation's undisputed #1 port. The population numbers are just staggering. In 1800, New York had about 60,000 people. By the middle of the century, it was over 500,000, fueled by waves of immigration from Europe and Asia. In 1827, New York State abolished slavery, leading to an influx of free African Americans seeking new opportunities. But this rapid growth came with serious challenges. Deadly cholera outbreaks swept through the crowded city in the 1830s. The Great Fire of 1835 burned down a huge chunk of the financial district. Notorious slums like the Five Points and Hell's Kitchen became infamous for crime and gang warfare. This tension boiled over in 1863 with the draft riots, 5 days of horrific violence that remained the deadliest civil unrest in American history. Out of the chaos of the mid-19th century came the Gilded Age, an era of incredible wealth and cultural blossoming. The city realized it needed green space, and in 1858, Central Park began to take shape. World-class institutions were born: the American Museum of Natural History in 1869, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in 1870, and the New York Public Library in 1895. This was also an age of engineering marvels. The Brooklyn Bridge, a symbol of ambition and ingenuity, stitched the boroughs together in 1883. In 1886, the Statue of Liberty, a gift from France, rose in the harbor to welcome the world. And welcome them it did. Ellis Island opened in 1892, becoming the gateway for 12 million immigrants chasing the American dream. And in 1904, the first subway line rumbled to life, creating the underground circulatory system that still keeps the city moving today. As the 20th century dawned, New York started to look up way up. The race to the sky was on. Between the 1900s and the 1930s, iconic skyscrapers like the Woolworth Building, the Chrysler Building, and the king of them all, the Empire State Building, pierced the clouds, creating the most famous skyline on Earth. The Roaring Twenties brought prohibition, which, paradoxically, made the city's nightlife legendary. Tens of thousands of secret speakeasies buzzed with jazz music, bootleg liquor, and an underground glamour that defined the era. But the party came to a crashing halt. The Wall Street crash of 1929 plunged the nation into the Great Depression. The city that symbolized wealth now had Hooverville's shantytowns for the homeless sprouting in Central Park. But New York is nothing if not resilient. When World War II erupted, the city's factories roared back to life, churning out war materials, while its ports shipped soldiers and supplies to the front lines. New York emerged from the war stronger and more globally important than ever before. The post-war era cemented New York's status as a modern icon. In 1952, the United Nations established its headquarters on the East River, making the city the political capital of the world. It stole the art world's crown from Paris and challenged London as the center of global finance. The 1970s brought challenges with a spike in crime and a fiscal crisis, but again, the city reinvented itself. Projects like the World Trade Center, completed in 1973, were part of a massive redevelopment that sparked a powerful revival. From a Dutch fur trading post to a home for 8.3 million dreamers, New York's story is one of relentless reinvention. When it gets knocked down, it builds taller. When it faces a setback, it comes back older. That's why, after 400 years of grit, glory, and non-stop hustle, New York isn't just a city, it's the ultimate comeback story. Thanks for watching Civic Mind Facts, where we turn history into hype, one epic story at a time. If you learned something new, smash that subscribe button, ring the bell for more stories, and drop your favorite fact about New York City in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.